Subject to sing about, didn't she? Turn with me to Revelation chapter 22, where right out of the text, they shall see his face. And that they is the angel talking because it's really us. It's we shall see his face. What a thought. You're in a good place this morning, not because of me doing the preaching, but I get to read the text to you this morning. We've just crept through the book of Revelation till we finally got to 22. So nearly a year we've been in this great book and just easing our way through and seeing what God had to say to John and reveal to us about the end time. And this morning, chapter 22, we're beginning to wrap it up this morning, and then Brother David will preach next Sunday, and the following Sunday, if I'm able, we'll wrap up the book of Revelation. And this morning, Christians, we get to see the subject of the fact that we one day will stand in his presence, face to face with our great God. Now, chapter 21 was about the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, and there was really, in the original text, there's no break between 21 and 22. But I just didn't have time to finish it all last week while we were looking at two sermons. 21 runs right on into 22 because we're still talking about John seeing the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. I made a long illustration about all the gold that John saw. The whole city, he said, was 1,500 miles cubical. Not only square, taking up about half of the United States of America in size, but cubical, 1,500 miles high. And John is viewing this as it comes down out of heaven. And then it goes right on into what we're about to read in chapter 22 as to what he sees when he's looking right into heaven. I made the comment last week about how that I really didn't understand why God chose that it would be a cube. Why 1,500 miles? Why 1,500 miles square? Why 1,500 miles cubed? And I also showed you the picture of the tabernacle, in which later the temple mirrored the tabernacle in the exact same size as far as the tabernacle, the temple proper. I mean, remember I told you that Herod's temple covered many acres. It was a lot more because there were many other buildings. But the actual holy place and the Holy of Holies that God spelled out to Moses was the exact same size in both the tabernacle and the temple. And remember, the holy place was where the priest went every day, and then the curtain separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies, with God's presence, was a cubicle, was a cube. It was the same width, same length, same height. And it hit me this week what that's all about. I had to do a little bit more study before it really hit me. Because in this passage we're about to read in chapter 22, we're going to see that we're able to behold the face of God. Remember when he talked to Moses and told him, come up on the mountaintop to see me, but don't let anyone, don't even let an animal touch the mountain. When the rumbling is going on the mountaintop, when my presence is on the mountaintop, only you, Moses, because I've set you aside. I've made you holy because I've set you aside that you might come into my presence. But anything else even touches the mountain, they'll die because of the holiness of God. And then Moses wanted to see him, and he couldn't even look on his face. And God said, I'll put you in the cleft of the rock. We sing about that. And I'll put my hand over you as I walk past you. And as I walk away from you, I'll remove my hand so that you can see me walking away. But my holiness is such, my face is such that you can't even look upon it and live. That's the holiness of God. When Moses would come back off the mountaintop, they'd have to put a veil over his face because the reflective radiance of God's holiness just had his face lit up. And the reason that God didn't want the people to see the glory on his face was not because it would somehow scare them. He didn't want them to look upon Moses as the glory was fading away. He didn't want them to even have the picture in their mind of the glory of God fading, because it was just the reflective glory of God, and God's glory, of course, does not fade. So this is a big to do. This is a big deal, that you and I one day will be returned to the state that Adam and Eve were in the garden, because Adam and Eve got to walk in the cool of the garden. You get this, with God the Father himself. They got to walk in the garden and just talk with God, to fellowship, to commune, to have an intimate relationship with the Creator of the universe. And this 1,500-mile cubicle, the New Jerusalem it's called, is going to be the Holy of Holies for planet Earth. I don't understand all that. I don't think we were meant to understand all that. But God is going to sit on his throne in the presence of us, and the gates of the city, 12 of them, will never be closed. We'll have access to the holiness of God without any thought or any hesitation. Just walk into the presence of God. And what are we going to do? We're not sitting on a cloud strumming a harp like some Casper the Ghost that some people think that's all heaven's going to be, that it's just going to be boring. I don't know what we're going to be, but I want you to think about something. What is it like on planet Earth when you're at your very best as far as knowing and feeling God's presence? Maybe it's when you're helping someone that's sick and you know that what you're doing is really appreciated and you're making a difference in your life, and you just feel like you're doing God's bidding by helping that person. Or maybe you're looking into the face, and I got that feeling just talking with AJ this last week, and both here present and over the phone, and knowing that what I'm doing is making an eternal difference in somebody's life. And think about what it means to, quote, serve God now, and multiply that by 1,000,000 times. More than Paul said the eye can conceive and the mind comprehend, that we're going to be serving our great God. Whatever that looks like, folks, I think it's going to be the greatest thing, more than we could imagine, how that we're serving God, not just sitting around singing a little song and doodling our hands and playing a harp, but serving our great God, and him being the center of our universe, basically, and we just get to come into his presence and worship him. Church, I don't think we even can comprehend what God has planned for us in all eternity. And if you're not a Christian, if you're here this morning and you've never been saved, the reverse of all that's going to be true for you. I brought out in one of the messages, as anguish and as horrible as hell's going to be as far as the lake of fire, and that's what the Bible calls it, I think even greater anguish is going to be the knowledge of knowing full well what we've been separated from for an eternity of time, that we'll never have the opportunity again to be around and in the presence of the goodness of God. And it's not because of what we've done in this lifetime or what we've not done. It's not bad people going to hell and good people going to heaven. It's people that have said yes to the invitation that this great mighty God gave to us, and that he gave his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to come into our world and become flesh so that we could see him and behold him and touch him, and he even, as we talked about in Sunday school, wept in our presence. We got to understand just a touch of who he is, and one day to spend all eternity with this great God. Look with me in Revelation 22 as John gets to explain just a little bit more about what heaven's going to be like. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal. Remember everything we've seen about this holy city, this pure gold, pure as crystal, and the different gems that the city wall was made out of was all pure as crystal. And then 21, and again here in 22, God being the light of the world. Everything is going to be crystal clear with this radiance. Like you talk about how an LED is a little bitty part, and it has a big reflective element to it that radiates the light. We've got a 1,500-mile cubical lens that's radiating with the power of the God of the universe being the light of the world. Won't even be a sun anymore, for his radiance is going to outshine the sun. There'll be no darkness. The gates will not be shut. It'll be, it won't be blindingly bright. It's not going to be anything that hurts us. But just get an idea of the brilliance of what John is talking about, where he sees this pure river of the water of life. And I don't even know if John knew what he was looking at. Is it water? Or is it something resembling water? But whatever it is, it's what Jesus told. Remember when he met the Samaritan woman? He was at the well and she was about to draw water, and he asked for a drink. And I love what the text says, because I just see this woman just looking around. She says, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with. How are you going to give me any water?" Because Jesus had just told her, "Ask of me water, and I'll give you everlasting water, that you'll never thirst again." She said, "Sir, give me that water." She wanted that water, and Jesus gave her that water. And so we have this picture of Jesus himself being the everlasting life, and Jesus is here. And this water is proceeding from the throne. I mean, the throne is the headwaters of the river of life. It's coming from Jesus. Jesus is the light of the world. He is the everlasting water. When you drink of him, and Revelation's going to close in Revelation 22 with anyone that's thirsty. Anybody in the world. That's why Christianity is a narrow way, but it includes everybody if you'll come by the narrow way. And Jesus made that plain. The only way to the Father is but through me, and it's by me. And so Jesus sitting on the throne, the river of life, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. That'd have to be an awesome picture. I don't know how big that river is going to be. But you know my inquisitive nature. I had to do some Googling here just come to mind, and it was interesting to me. Maybe it will be to you. When I was at Sneed Street up in Marktree, we took a group of children up to Mammoth Springs, Big Springs. Any of you ever been to Mammoth Springs? It's I think it's the 7th largest spring in the North American continent. And it's got hundreds of thousands of gallons per second coming out of the ground. Well, that got me thinking. How many of you been to Niagara Falls? And there's another falls. What's the other fall bigger than Niagara that's some fall right there in that area? Horseshoe Falls? Even bigger than Niagara. And while I was searching volumes of waterfalls and such, I run across the Denmark Strait. Any of you know what the Denmark Strait is? You biology, Miss Nancy's done. She's learned all that so many times. But Miss Nancy, the Denmark Strait is actually a waterfall underwater off the coast of Greenland. And it's a waterfall underwater because it's where the warm water of the Atlantic, which is not normally warm water, but it meets the cold water of the Antarctica. And because of that, the weight of cold water pushes up the warm water, and that warm water pushes up, falls over a fall that then drops 2 miles, 10,000 feet. And Brother Bill, if you had a 5-gallon bucket there, and if you don't catch the water coming off the Denmark Strait, you would need 8 million 5-gallon buckets every second to catch the water coming off. That just got my attention. It has nothing to do, I don't guess, with the throne of God and the water coming out of it. But the water coming out of the throne is going to be sufficient for the whole world. The Bible's already told us there's no more sea. So I don't know. You know, we don't know what we don't know. We know what John tells us here. But the water of life is going to proceed from this cubicle, this 1,500-mile square cubed city. Verse 2, and in the middle of its street, and on either side of the river. So the river is somewhat like the San Antonio Boardwalk. Some of you have probably been there. Kelly and I got to go there one time and enjoy San Antonio and see the Alamo and go down Boardwalk, and it's the river. So, and on either side of it is the boardwalk with all kind of cafes and things of that nature. It's a really beautiful place to go. And so the middle of the street is the river. So on either side of the river of water of life and heaven is this tree of life, which we were introduced to in the book of Genesis. In fact, the 2 trees mentioned in Genesis was the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil. And after Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God had to take them out of the garden. He had to escort them out, if you will, and posted a cherubim, a mighty angel in a spiritual dimension, I think still there today, to keep the devil from going in and perhaps getting fruit of life, because anyone eating from the tree of life would live forever. And had Adam and Eve ate of the tree of life in a condemned state, they would have lived condemned forever and ever. And even in their sinful state, even after God had shed innocent blood to redeem them, had they ate of it, they would have still never been able to live in a spiritual body. That's the way I understand it. That's the importance of God positioning this cherubim so that no one would ever go back to the tree of life. And yet the tree of life is going to be in heaven freely for everyone to come to and everyone to eat. In fact, it says, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Vegetarians, I suppose, but every month these trees is going to provide all the sustenance that mankind is going to need. And the leaves for the healing of the nations, the word healing is not like you've got a sickness. There will be no sickness in heaven. It's actually an interesting word, therapeutic in the Greek. Guess what words we get from that? Therapy. It's for the therapy of the nations. It's God somehow is going to use these trees just to help us to be healed and whole and just without sickness for all of eternity. John is seeing into a beautiful sight into heaven. In verse 3, there'll be no more curse. What happened in the Garden of Eden? God's curse because of sin. That's all humanity has known. That's all you and I have known. All we've known, all mankind will know, is the curse of sin in this lifetime. We'll know the curse of sin through cancer and through death and through all kinds of heartache and travail and sorrow. This world is a place of great sorrow because of the curse. And God is telling John to tell us, in that place, there is no more curse. The curse is gone. We will live forever in the presence of God, eating from the tree of life, drinking from the water of life, never again to experience what we've experienced here. There will be no more curse, verse 4. But the throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servant shall serve him, what I talked about earlier. That may at first just seem like so many words. But as I tried to explain, you just think about what that means now and how good that makes us feel now. And I think a million times fold over what that's going to be for us as the servants of a God that we'll spend all eternity learning from, serving, worshiping, living the greatest fulfilled life imaginable. I don't know what the rest of the universe is going to be for all of our enjoyment, I think. I don't know what is going to happen with outside this great city. We're not told. We're just told that we're going to be serving a God that can speak and the universe comes into existence. A God that can speak, and archangels that are so powerful we can't even comprehend them. The archangels, Michael, the Bible says in Jude, would not even approach Lucifer. And Lucifer's the archangel that fell, because I think Lucifer thought, as looking out over all creation, he was the greatest being out there. And Lucifer was so delusional that he was so little compared to the greatness of God that God just spoke him out of heaven and will one day just speak him. Lucifer doesn't have a clue as strong, and the reason I even bring him up, he's beyond what we can comprehend in his power, and he's yet still a created being. We do not know what we do not know about this great God, that we'll get to spend all of eternity, him revealing himself to us in such a way that we live in a way that is beyond our imagination to enjoy today. That, I think, is what God's got in store for us. In verse 4, the whole title of the message and the singing and everything we talked about today. Church, for the first time, we're going to get to come right into the presence of this great holy God. The whole gospel story, the Old Testament we call it in our Bibles, is really the word for Old Covenant. The Old Covenant that God made with Abraham was that out of Abraham I'm going to bless all the nations of the world. All the Old Covenant is a forward look to Christ and what Christ was going to do, because he's of the lineage of Abraham. And he's the child that God made the promise to into Abraham, that there's coming a child that'd be a blessing to all the nations of the world, not just Jewish people, not just Israel, all the nations of the world. He is indeed a Jew by lineage. But he would be a blessing to all the world. All the New Testament, we call it, comes from the word the New Covenant. And the New Covenant looks all way backward. The Old Covenant's forward looking to Jesus. The New Covenant is backward looking for all of us until Jesus comes back. We're looking back at a time when this great God became a human being and born into our world and lived 33 years a sinless life and died on the cross and rose from the dead. And our faith in him is what's going to allow us to get into heaven. And it's the picture of what happened on the cross. And you've heard me say it and you've heard others say it. That the cross is Jesus nailed on a cross. Arms outstretched, one outstretched to God the Father, because mankind can never come into the presence of God the Father. Our sinful nature, the curse that we're born in, can never come into the presence. Not even an animal could approach the mountain that God's presence was on and not die. And God used his son Jesus to reach out to God. And then with the other hand, he reaches out to sinful man. And it's only on the cross. That's why the cross is the only way to heaven. Buddha had no access to the righteousness and the holiness of God. He was a sinful being like anybody else. Anybody, Muhammad, anybody is over here. No man can reach into the presence of this holy God and bring lost mankind and God together. But Jesus Christ bridged that gap. That's what the crucifixion was all about. And the Apostle Paul even makes it worse. The Apostle Paul says, you're over here blind, dead, and going your own direction. So when I asked you, what chance does humanity have of finding a holy God when he can't even get on the mountain and when he's not even looking for the mountain and when in fact he's blindly going the opposite direction? Mankind will never, it's not like I'll never be able to climb a tree or something and that's iffy. No, this is never, as in never a possibility of it ever happening. That sinful man on his own is going to live good enough to come into the presence of a holy, righteous God. It's never going to happen. Thus we come by way of the cross, and that's what Jesus Christ did for us. And we're escorted right into the presence, and we behold his face, and his name shall be on our foreheads. You see, it's not common today, but it was common in the Roman world to have a brand, certainly as a slave. Well, for us today, that would be bad. That'd be, we wouldn't want that. But to be identified with this great God, I don't know what the mark's going to be, but we don't have his name somehow on our forehead, that we are the children and the servants both of this great God. In verse 5, there shall be no night there. They need no lamp nor light of the sun, for the Lord gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. That typically today would mean you have to reign over somebody, so there'd be subjects and kings, and that's not the sense of it here at all. But we're going to be heirs and joint heirs with Christ himself. It's don't all be ours. We're going to be at home there. We get to go into the Father, even as Jesus called him in the Aramaic, Abba, Father. And Abba is our word, Daddy. It's not this, our Father who art in heaven, which we should reverence. We should fear this great God. But the other side of it is like a little child, running into his father because Daddy can do anything. Just listen to my grandkids, 3 and 5-year-old, talk about their daddy. Daddy can do anything. Just ask Daddy to do it. And Daddy can do it. And the word Abba in the Aramaic is like our word Daddy. We just get to go in to the face of Daddy and just talk with him and just be in his presence and learn from him. And they shall reign forever and ever. And then he says, and the angel saying to John, which sums up now, because this is the way Revelation started. This is kind of a summation verse, because we're now, the rest of Revelation is going to be truly going into the end times. But here's the summation of what he's had to say about this new Jerusalem, this new city. And so the angel says, John, I want you to know this. These words, all of Revelation now, the visions you've seen, they are faithful and they are true. And the Lord God of the holy prophets sent his angel to show me, to show John, so that he could show his servants the things which must shortly take place. We've already dealt with that. It's been 2,000 years. But 1,000 years as a day and a day as 1,000 years, the Lord Jesus is still coming back soon. And he wants us to all be ready. And the only way to be ready, church, and if you're here this morning and you're not ready, if you were to die, in fact, I asked AJ that the other day. Now, I'll say more about that when he comes up in a moment. But he was fully conscious of the fact, through tears, that if he died, he would not go to heaven. And I asked him, I said, that's not a good place to be, is it? And he said, no, it is not. And for you this morning, if you don't know, that's not a good place to be. You're in a place this morning that cares. Would you bow your heads, please? And I want to pray for you.